Hi, so I just want to walk you through my new device, Natural Selection P, and this is one of two devices that I'm putting out. The other one is Natural Selection S, and if you watch the walkthrough of the other one, then you should understand a lot of the core concepts of this device. But if not, I'll go over them, and I'll talk about the core concept, and then I'll go through all the sections of it and describe how everything works. So the idea of this device is to evolve presets of devices, which is just to treat each preset as an individual and then have them mix their values with another preset to create a child. And then over generations, some cool things happen and you can add some mutation, and your kind of biases will kind of emerge in the generations as they go. And I'll kind of talk about it. I'll try to kind of demonstrate it now. So let's say there's a filter we have right here. Let's say I want to evolve presets of this filter. So here I have the device, and it says right here, put your target device or rack to the left of this device. And you can change that, but right now our target device is the filter, which is to the left, so we're good. And it says press collect, which is here. So I'll press collect, and it collected the parameters, and I'll talk about that later. And I'll kind of like skip over stuff now just to prove the concept, but I'll explain it in more detail later. So don't worry if you don't understand everything. So now what I want to do is create presets of this filter to be able to create new generations and evolve from. So right now the filter is just like this. Let me add a preset for that state. So I did that. Here's the preset. It's this thing. I'll talk about it more later. Okay, and then now let's say I want the filter to be like this. Then I'll add another seed here, and if I click between these, we can see that it loads the two presets, and that's fine. So far it's just like a fancy preset system, but it'll get cooler. And then let's say I wanted to change it up a bit more. I guess I'm just doing random stuff. Alright, let's say we have these three individuals. Let's call them seeds. Because they're like the seed DNA, and conveniently they're also called seeds in the device. Okay, now what you do in the device is you just create new presets by mixing other presets together. So I'll get into more detail, but basically if I press this button here, I created a new generation, and these are the children of the last three presets. Each of them had a child with each other. And as you can see, they share some similar values, but are not all identical. And let's say I liked this one and this one, then I could, let me go back. Then I could create a new generation, and we're not getting a lot of variety because there wasn't a lot to begin with, but I just want to drill in the concept that in this device, you're creating generations, which are these things here, of presets that mix with each other. And right now, there's not a lot of interesting things happening, but basically, you can do this to any targeted device. So right now, I targeted a filter, and it doesn't have to be a single device. So if I had this filter in a rack with this analog, let me just demonstrate it. So I'll put this filter and analog in a rack. Okay, so they're in this rack here. And let me just delete all this and recollect. So I just deleted everything and recollected the target parameters, but from this whole group. So now, if I created a preset here, it's for this whole rack. It's for the filter and the synth. And so if I randomized it, and I'll talk about it later, but I just created a preset here that was randomized a bit. And you can see if I switch between these two, it changes the filter because it was randomized. And if I close the filter, it also changes the synth. So all that to demonstrate that you can also target racks or individual devices with this. And that's the core concept. Now, I didn't really get into anything super interesting, but this is the core concept of the device, that you kind of make presets and have them mate with each other, so to speak, and create new preset generations. And you'll find that, and you choose which passes on. So if I select this, that means if I create new generations, this one passes on its DNA, but this one doesn't. So basically, through this natural selection that you're doing, you'll kind of get sounds that are more biased towards your preferences, and it's like really interesting how all the sounds can emerge. And there's lots of random elements you can add to like create new variations, for which you can pick the DNA that strongest suits your preferences. So I'll make it more clear the power of the device as I go through each of the functions, but that's the essential concept. Let me ungroup this, and so we can just work with the filter. Okay, so let me recollect. Okay, so let me go over each section. Sorry, this is so impromptu. I'm just talking into my laptop. So I'm going to start with the header, and then I'll go through each tab and go from left to right. So at the header, we have 3 main tabs here, and these are for the 3 main sections of parameters. This one, family tree, deals with basically what we were doing, creating generations and evolving them. This one here, morph, deals with morphing them together, and I'll talk about that in a bit. And this last one here deals with the parameters that you collect from your target, and you can scale them and stuff, and I'll talk about it more later. Okay, what else is going on up here? Well, there's this button, collect, and as we saw, when we press this button, it collects the parameters and allows you to start using the device. This sets the targeted device that you want to collect from. So right now we have it as before, meaning before in the signal chain. And so that means it's to the left. If we set it to after, that means we target a device to the right, which there's none. And if it's parent, that means if these were all in a rack together, it would target the entire rack that it's in. Which is convenient for saving presets. If you group all these together and then save them as a preset, you'd want to do it as target parent. Okay, the last thing is, is this collect. So far we just collected all the parameters from the devices, so that's what parameter is. There's also macros, so if this was a rack, and we only wanted to collect the macros, we do that. And this one collects both parameters and macros, so those ones with macros have to be racks. Okay, cool. Now the one thing to note is, if you already started making presets, but pressed collect again, you'll get this dialog, and you have 2 options. One is that you can delete everything you've been doing and just like recollect a new device. So if you wanted to just change the device to something else like this and just start over, you can press this, and you'll just basically start over with this effect. However, if you don't want to do that and you want to keep your tree, you'll do this. But if that's only if if I wanted to, instead of use this filter, use a different filter or something, then you can do this and it will just apply everything you've been doing to a new matching device. But if I did this to a different device like this one, it will probably break, but it could do something weird and cool, but it will probably break. So you only do this option when you want to replace it with an identical device or rack. Okay, let's delete this and do this one. Okay, so now I'll talk about each section. So the first thing you do once you collect parameters is it says add seeds to start. So seeds are the same as everything else except they don't have parents. When we create new generations and stuff, the children have parents, so they receive their value mixture from two parents. But at the beginning, there are no parents to mix with. So that's why you add starting points. You add starting seeds. And there's a couple ways to add seeds. Or modes for adding seeds. So you press this button here when you want to add seed. This sets how many seeds you want to add. Usually you just add one, but maybe you wouldn't want to. Okay, and then so this says where do the seed values come from. So there's two options. The first one is current, so that just means when you press add seed, it's going to copy the current values and make a seed preset from these values. So if I do that, if I press that, this preset is the current value. So if I change the value and then reload it, it just loaded back to where it was. Okay, and this option, you can add chaos. It's just a random spread. So if I added 13%, which is a lot depending on the device, maybe not so much for this. Now I'm going to press seed and it'll add it from these current values but with 13% randomness. So look, I'm switching between them and yeah, they're a little bit different from each other. Okay, the other seed option is random. So this just, when you press seed, it just creates one completely random. See, it looks a lot different. And look, it's very random. And yeah, this is really powerful and like for a filter, probably most of these would sound pretty cool. For a whole synth, a lot of them won't sound that cool and you just choose the ones that do. Okay, below that, this whole section deals with when you create a new generation. So, okay, so mutation. So when I created, I'm going to skip this for a second. All right, so this button down here creates a new generation. So over here, I'll talk about this for a second. If I click one of these, these are the different presets, right? The different seeds or children. And when I click them, it loads them. If I double click them, it toggles their highlight. This, like I said before, selects them to pass on their DNA when a new generation's made. So let's say we liked these three. We don't like that one, let's say. Now when I press new generation, these three will make children, this one won't. So I'll do that, and now we have 3 new children. Okay. Let's say I like these 2. If I press new generation again, now we have more children. Okay, so new generation creates a new generation, highlighting them, selects them to pass their DNA. Okay, mutation. So when two presets create a new preset, I feel like I'm giving a sex talk or something. When two presets create a new preset, they mix their DNA, which means they mix their parameter values, much like, DNA is copied. So mutation says the probability of the time when mixing those that a mutation will happen. So if right now, if I set it to 5, 5%, it would be like if these two made a kid, for every parameter, it has a 5% chance of mutating. And when a mutation happens, this mutation mode tells it how it happens. So right now, if a mutation happens, that parameter, instead of getting the correct value from one of the parents, instead just gets a random value. The other mutation mode is copy error. So in this mode, when a mutation happens, instead of getting the correct value, it gets a value that's adjacent to it. So it gets like a copy error. Like real mutations, I guess. Okay. Okay, so this one, breed with. So right now, when I press new generation, every child that's highlighted green breeds with every other one to create a new generation. So let me show you first. If this view that we've been in is the view of a generation. So here's a generation of children. If I go to this view, there's multiple generations. This is the one we were just in. If I click this one, here's a different generation. If I click back out and click this one, here's the first generation, the seed one. So as you notice, in every generation there are green ones. So if I press new generation, then it's going to create a fourth generation with all the children of all of them. So let me do that. Boom. And you see there's a lot of them. And that's because every single one of these bred together to make this generation. So there's some incest. However, with this parameter here, breed with, right now when it says all, it just means all of them breed. But if I move this up to last gen, that means that just this last generator breeds. And if I do it to last 2 gens, that means just the last 2. So when I press new generation, only these 2 will create the next one. And so on and so forth. If I go last 3, last 4, etc. So yeah, let me prove it. So if I just did the last 2 gen and did that, look, it's not that many children considering that the one before it was more. Okay, then this button here, undo gen, just removes the last generation. So boom, that one's gone. And clear clears everything. It clears your whole tree. Now, but when I press it, it gives you this dialog. It says double click presets to start a new tree with. So then I could go through here and be like, oh, I like this one, and I double click it, keep it. And I'll be like, oh, I like this one, double click it, keep it. Let's say I double click those, double click this one and this one. All right, it says I selected 5, and now I say clear with selection. I press clear, and now what it did was erase everything and start a new 0 generation with the 5 I selected. And if I press clear and didn't select any, it just deletes them all. Okay. Now, that's this whole section. Some other things to know. If you click in an empty space in the generation view, it takes you back to the family view. Sorry, let me make a couple generations. Okay. The generation you select, if you go into family view, you can see the ancestral lines. Oh yeah, so very important is the function button. So if I hold shift and hover over a child, you can see 2 buttons appear. These buttons can change the child's DNA. So the top button, or I'll describe the bottom button. So the bottom button just gets whatever values are here currently and stores them in that child. So let's say I load this preset and it looks like that, and here's the shape. If I hold this and press this button, boom, now you can see this shape is basically in here, and if I switch between them, they're the same. That's because I stored the currently loaded values into the preset. And that could be really useful for a lot of things. I mean, so many things, it's hard to say simply. But let's say like I didn't like the resonance of this. I could lower the resonance down, and then save back into here. And now this altered and has the lower resonance. Now if I switch back, you can see this has lower resonance. Yeah, so many other important reasons, but yeah, just definitely adjusting things is the biggest one. Okay, this button above it refreshes the child. So this child right now is a child of two other preset parents. These two. So that means that it received one type of mixture of their DNA because they're mixed at random. If I press this button, it makes the parents remix their DNA again and have a new child. So here, if I keep pressing it, it's just going to keep remixing their DNA. And it'll keep having a different child. And depending on the difference between the parents, each child could be very different or kind of similar. Looks like it's pretty different. So the parents must be pretty different from each other. Now, if you go to the first generation, the seed generation, they don't have parents. So when you press the remix button, it doesn't remix their DNA. Instead, it just applies the same add seed parameters and creates a new seed with them. So right now they're set to random, so if I press the remix, it's just going to give it a random seed. Okay, that's this whole section. It is the longest section. Thanks for bearing with me. Alright, this section's the morph section. So here, you can basically morph between these different presets to get even more variety or do cool modulating stuff. So it's actually just two XY grids of presets that you can blend between. So in each corner of the XY grid, you can add a preset in order to morph. So if I press this corner, there's a little plus button in each corner. If you press it, it'll take you back to the family tree in order to select a child. So if I press it, let's say I want this child, then I just click this child, and boom, this child is now here in this corner. Now let's say I press this corner. I'll choose a random child, that one. And I'll just do other random ones too. Alright, so now if I move this around, you can see it's morphing between the different children, which is cool. Now keep in mind, if you're just morphing a few parameters, this is like a nuclear bomb when you just could just like modulate with an LFO. But you can do some crazy stuff with it. And you'll find that really heavy devices, or like if you did this on a drum rack or like a lot of things, it might be pretty rough doing this. And there's nothing you can really do about that. It's just a lot of parameters or weird things you're moving. But you can still use it to find cool combinations. Okay, so if I map this side, let me click that. Now let's say I wanted to cancel it and not do it. I can press this button and go back. But I don't want to cancel it. So let's choose some more children for this side. Okay. And then this slider in the center blends between the two sides. So if I'm on this side, I can move these around. If I'm this side, I can move these around. And then I can blend between the two sides. So pretty powerful stuff you can do with this. And then these are all automatable, so you can map them, whatever. Alright. And then the final thing is the parameters menu. So we collected this auto filter, and it's got all these parameters. So if you go in the parameters tab, we can see here's the auto filter, and here's all its parameters. We've got the filter type, circuit, slope, frequency, everything. Everything that's MIDI automatable, which I'll get into after this, is the limitations of this device, there are definitely some. Okay, so in this page, up here, you can select from the audio chain and the device. Right now we just have a filter, so there's only a filter. If I grouped these, and now it's the analog synth and the filter in the rack, and let me just delete everything and recollect. Now if I go here, we can see there's the analog and the filter. So if I open these, we can see the different parameters. Chain is if you had racks inside racks, or like a drum rack, which you can do. Okay. So if I wanted the filter, let's say these two. Alright, okay, let me skip these for a second. Alright, so for each parameter, you have a little toggle, and then you have a little percentage boxes. The toggle, so if you untoggle it, that means that if you made seeds and changed them, it would omit these, so these will never change. So you can actually just omit these from the whole process of morphing and everything here. And then these things scale them. So that means, like, if you didn't, say for the frequency of the filter, if you didn't want to use the full range when you change things, you can just scale that to the range you want it to. Alright, so then these functions up here, select all, selects all of them to be included, select none, selects none. So none, all. This one I generally leave on. You probably would want to. It's pretty conservative anyway, so it usually doesn't cause any issues. Basically what this does is, look, we can already see if I go to analog, you see there's already some automatically not included. The device on and these things that map the keys to the pitch, they're already omitted because they would probably just cause issues if you tried morphing them and stuff. You don't want the device to turn on and off unless you want it to. Then you can include it. But this thing when you press collect, if this is on, it will try to omit things like that. Okay, and then the final thing on the top is this, which is the thing that shifts between the pages of parameters. Some of them have a lot, like this synth. Synths have a lot usually. And then filter only has one page, so. Alright, so that's all the functionality of the device. There's only one thing left to talk about, which is its limitations, which actually are worth noting, and that's why I'm going to spend a whole section of this video talking about it, because you should know. Especially to know when things are going wrong. Okay, so this device, as you can see or have seen, can capture parameters of devices it's next to. So let me collect these parameters. And as we've seen, I can change them like this, right? Now, I'm only able to collect parameters that are visible and automatable, which means the only parameters this device can use and change is ones that if you right click, it says show automation. Ones that you can map to your MIDI controller and automate. Those are the only parameters that I can automate. So, for example, parameters I cannot automate are things like in wavetable, I cannot automate the wavetable selection because you can't automate it, so I cannot collect it and change it. And same with the matrix here. This whole matrix and all the new devices matrices, I cannot change these or collect these. So if I were to collect this wavetable, right? And look, maybe I didn't, wait, sorry, I pressed the wrong one. Okay, and look, if I were to change between these children here, you can see all these parameters are changing, right? But this whole matrix doesn't change. So this cannot collect complex parameters like that. Basically anything that can't automate. Same with roar and meld and all those new matrix. It can't collect it. And so it can still work with the device. See, I can still change it, but I can't change things. So for like wavetables and stuff, if you wanted to seed presets and try to morph them, you wouldn't be super successful because you wouldn't be able to change this. However, if you just want to morph like a single patch or all these other parameters, you can totally use this device, or just macros of it, whatever. You just can't do those. And oh, that's something I maybe forgot to mention. This is not dealing with the limitations, but that's a whole way to work with this device. Like, let's say there was a bunch of autofilter presets you liked. You can, so let's say I collected the autofilter. So right now, these seeds control the autofilter, right? But I could actually just hot swap and be like, oh, I love this autofilter preset or this one. And you could set the add seed to be current. And now when I press add seed, it added this preset to here. And so if I load this preset, now I could load it to here. And now I can switch between them, and now I could evolve them and morph them. And not only that, you could do this for like analog and load an analog pad presets and seed them and then evolve them together. It's crazy. You can do amazing stuff with that. But yeah, back to limitations. So, okay, the other set of limitations to talk about, which is related, is plugins. So plugins, like, I only have like one that I could do, which is Alto. So for plugins like Alto, you have this configure list. So if I press configure and touch some parameters in Alto, now they show up down here. And so now if I pressed collect, it collects only these 3 parameters. So if I made seeds, you see they don't look that impressive because they're just 3 values. Yeah, so basically all that to say is you're extremely limited with plugins. You're only able to access whatever you can configure, and Ableton only limits you to configuring 127 parameters of plugins. So basically, big plugins, you could never do the entire patch morphing because you can't even configure more than 127 parameters. On top of that, if a plugin has a complex UI that can't even make this list, then of course I also can't modulate them. So it's a similar issue as wavetable and stuff. Some things you can't modulate, some things you can. You can just choose to do a few parameters and get varieties in those. You can still use it on plugins, or use it on a plugin with less parameters. But that's also all that to say, that's why I created the other version of this device, Natural Selection S, which has its own internal synth and rhythm generator and effects system that does all the same stuff on with no limitations. So, alright, that's this very long walkthrough. Thanks for bearing with me. I hope you enjoyed the device.